Good evening, and welcome to What's Your Story? I'm your host, James Ransom Reed Jr. I have my very special guest, Justine Ginsberg, here with me today. And there were 3 other parts to this interview. This is the final part. Stay tuned. You do not want to miss this, and you should check out all 3 before, okay? So sit back, relax, and let us entertain you and inform you and educate you as to better ways to take care of yourself. Justine, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Okay, now we're talking about drug addiction.
Yeah.
Justine, who the bane of our society today.
Yeah. Well,
Justine, you know what? I woke up this morning and I said, I want to be a coke addict.
said nobody ever.
I woke up this morning and I said, I want to be addicted to heroin.
Nobody ever said that.
I woke up this morning and I was determined to become an alcoholic.
Not in the history of my practice have I ever heard a person say that.
So take it from there.
Look, I think when we think about addiction, so much of what we think about addiction is driven by the movie industry, by TV, by advertisements, by stereotypes. And I got to tell you, out there in the real world, that's not true. Nobody in the history of the world ever decided that they wanted to become so dependent on a substance for their ability to get up and function, that's a life goal. And I think there is a portion of society that thinks that people who are suffering with addiction disorders are lazy, are people who've chosen this way of life. If they just think they can get themselves square, then they will. They can just will themselves to stop.
They can do like me.
Exactly. And unfortunately, that's not the way it works. In all my years of working with people and in working in mental health education and working as a nurse and working with our communities, I can tell you that individuals who suffer with addiction disorders look just like me and look just like you, and they're our teachers and our doctors and our lawyers and our police officers and the mum picking up their child in a daycare centre.
The school bus driver.
The school bus driver,
boy.
the pastor that works in a church. I mean, they're just like you and I, because addiction is one of the elements of the human condition.
It's an equal opportunity destroyer.
I love that. It is an equal opportunity destroyer. It does not discriminate. It's like when we talk about suicide. Suicide doesn't discriminate. It doesn't say, oh, you're a particular subset of our population, therefore you are the people who are going to take your own lives or attempt to.
Yes.
Everybody else is going to be safe. It doesn't work that way. And I think when we talk about mental health literacy, and we talk about changing the way we as communities and as businesses and as schools and as individuals look at mental health, we have got to try to remove the stereotype and recognize that everybody is at risk equally. Now, the experts will agree that there are some things that predispose us and we have increased risk factors, but ultimately any one of us could find ourselves in a situation where we are exposed to a traumatic event, where we have a series of things that happen in our life that are no fault of our own, that increase our risk of trying to seek alternative methods of dealing with the symptoms that we're experiencing. So, if you think about anxiety or depression, or you think about a person who is struggling to focus or to make it through high school or to make it through college, and the amount of pressure that is on us to continue to perform. If something is stopping you from doing that, it's kind of human nature to say, well, what can I do? What can I take that's going to be a quick fix? Because I don't have a lot of time here. I got to study for this exam tomorrow. So is there something I can quickly take that's going to help me to do it? Or every time I go out, I have such anxiety that I don't want to be around people. But if I do this, then all of a sudden my anxiety is less and I'm able to go out and be around people or perform my job or be better in my relationship. So all I have to do is to take this substance or take that drink, and now I'm not suffering. I don't have as much pain and as much of a challenge to be able to perform the things that I want to do and engage in the life I want to lead. And after a while, we become both psychologically and physically dependent on that substance. So depending on what the substance is can depend on whether there is just a physical dependence or a psychological dependence or both. And when a person is reliant on a substance to be able to function, and what substances do is they mask the underlying problem. They kind of put a Band-Aid over the top and allow you to keep kind of puddling along or paddling along. And before you know it, that thing that was an occasional becomes every second day, which becomes an every day, which becomes twice a day, which becomes a 3 times a day, which becomes a I can't function unless I have this on board so that I can complete the next task. And by the time a person is at that point, there is that erratic use of a substance, and that person is usually headed for some type of a crisis. And at that point, for a mental health professional and a support team, which is often what it takes, is a team of very well-educated and very talented individuals to help to unpick all of the things that created the predisposition and the dependence upon a substance. So it's not as simple as saying, well, let's just remove the substance, now you're fine. The substance just masked whatever the underlying issue was. So the longer we leave it, the longer the substance can mask whatever the underlying problem is, the higher the risk that the recovery and the return to normal function for that individual, optimal function for that person, is so much harder. And so much of what we're doing at the Farmington Valley Health District is recognizing that substance misuse disorder sits underneath mental health disorders, because it occurs because things happen in a person's life that create trauma and pain and dysfunction.
Yes.
So we take something to increase function. And the example I love to give is any one of us, if somebody has a headache, can probably reach into their pocketbook or the glove box of their car and pull out some sort of a pain reliever that you buy over the counter at the supermarket that gets rid of the headache.
Yeah.
And we naturally do that because who wants to have a headache?
That's correct.
It really gets in the way, huh?
It does.
So we make sure that we have at least one bottle of that substance floating around our house so that when someone has a headache, we can say, here, take 2 of these. In 20 minutes, you'll be feeling better. So if it's that simple to get rid of a headache and allow you to return to normal function, imagine what's happening if you have anxiety or depression or some other type of mental health symptom that's getting in the way of you being able to perform your life. Wouldn't you want to just reach for it and have it fix the underlying problem so you can go back to doing what you want to do?
When we think about mental health and we think about addiction, you said by the time somebody gets to you, they have to unravel layers of other stuff that has solidified in some degree.
Absolutely.
And now you got it twice as much difficulty as trying to get it from the very beginning. You said, what, 11 years?
It can take up to 11 years in this country.
Wow.
So, you know, a lot of the work that the Farmington Valley Health District is doing when it comes to mental health is really trying to educate our community about how to have mental health literacy and how to remove the stigma about asking for help. Because if we recognize that substance misuse and mental health sit together, then we know that part of the solution to dealing with substance misuse, and when I say part of the solution, I mean part of the solution, is creating environments where it's easier for us to identify when we're struggling early so that we never get to the substance misuse part. We deal with the underlying issues. So from a health district's perspective, we've done a couple of really wonderful things. We've invested in an online platform called Credible Mind, and I think at the end of this we're going to show a slide so the viewers at home can log on. This Credible Mind is an incredible online resource that is peer-reviewed by mental health specialists, and it is It is a library of mental health resources.
Okay.
And we've invested in this because we recognize that if we can get individuals to be curious about their mental health and well-being, and
Yes.
curious about building healthy mental health coping skills, resilient characteristics.
Yes.
And when they've got those early signs that something's not right, they've got a lot of insomnia, they're dealing with anxiety, they're dealing with a relationship that's not going well. If at that moment they've got an online resource that provides them with well-credentialed sources
Yes.
that help them to unpick and to navigate, is there somebody locally that I can contact to get assistance with? Is there an article I can read? Is there a new skill set I can try to learn to cope with some of these symptoms?
Yes.
We have a far better chance of having a community that is healthier for longer, and they have less chance of becoming so burdened by the challenges of mental health.
Gotcha.
That we end up in a situation where by the time they ask for help, there's a lot of damage done by the symptoms. So Credible Mind is a resource that's available free to everybody.
Okay.
You can make an online profile and take a whole bunch of wonderful peer-reviewed questionnaires that really help you to sort out what are some of the challenges you're facing and what are some of the tools you can use to do so. So for the viewers at home, please jump on the website. You'll see the link at the end and have a look at that resource because it's unbelievably valuable. The other things that we're doing is really looking at how do we use evidence-based programming. And evidence-based programming is programming that has been written and reviewed and credentialed and reviewed and rewritten and reviewed, that it actually works, that it does shift the needle when it comes to whatever the aim of the program is. So we use programs like QPR, Suicide Prevention Training, so Question, Persuade, Refer. That's a 90-minute suicide prevention training that really helps communities to understand what are the risk factors and what are those early warning signs that a person might be thinking about taking their own life. And most importantly, it helps a community to learn the language and to become more comfortable with asking the question, are you thinking of taking your own life? And understanding that by asking that question, you don't increase the risk that a person is going to take their own life. It's actually the opposite. And because we recognize that substance misuse is often one of the symptoms that is associated with people who have suicidal ideations. And if you think about that, if you're addicted to a substance and you feel like there's no way out, this cycle of being unable to function without a substance, there is a hopelessness that comes with being caught in that cycle. Because we recognize that that is an element of the risk factors for suicide, we have coupled together Narcan training with suicide prevention training because we want to get Narcan into the hands of our community where it is most at use. Having boxes of this at the health department are wonderful, but they're not a lot of use to people if they're at my desk. They're far more useful if they're in people's homes, if they're in churches, if they're in schools, community centres, libraries and businesses where there is a risk that a person may be at risk of an intentional or an unintentional overdose from an opioid. So a very quick overview of what Narcan is. Narcan is a substance that is what they call an opioid antagonist. So Narcan loves the opioid receptors in your brain far more than the opioids love the receptors in your brain. And it's greedy. It jumps on those receptors and it kicks the opioids off, which reduce or reverse the effects of opioid overdose, which is respiratory depression, which then leads to cardiac failure, which leads to death. So Narcan is unbelievably important because it offers us time. It buys us time. So if an individual is experiencing an overdose, by administering Narcan, which is actually in a nasal spray, I have one I prepared earlier.
Sure.
They're very simple little nasal atomizers. The importance of using these is that if a person is experiencing an opioid overdose, it hopefully can reverse the respiratory depression and give the individual an opportunity to be able to receive emergency services. So this is vitally important, and I think for people at home, what's important to understand is Narcan on its own doesn't do anything. If you don't have opioids in your system, it really isn't anything. It's kind of a bit like using a saline nasal spray.
Yes.
I think the side effect that people talk about is they might have a bit of a headache after they use it, but you don't have an allergic reaction to it. So it's safe to use even if you're not sure that the person who you are helping has consumed an opioid.
So it doesn't harm them.
It's not going to harm them.
Yes.
So that's why it's so important that we have it readily available in our communities. It should be in every AED. So if you see an AED in a restaurant or a shopping mall, I would hope that there is Narcan in there so that the public can use it. I think every home should have it, just like they have Band-Aids and rubbing alcohol to deal with cuts and bruises at home. I think every home should have Narcan, because you just don't know when an individual is going to be in your home who might be at risk of an overdose. And if you can use a simple atomizer to reverse an overdose and give that individual an opportunity to be helped by emergency services, why wouldn't you have that in your home? So we work very hard to dispense that. Whenever we do QPR trainings, we also do a Narcan training so that our participants are able to go home with that and go home understanding the importance of not only knowing how to use it, understanding that it's safe to use, and understanding that if they do use it, they do still need to call 911.
Okay.
Because there is a chance that once the Narcan wears off, it's got a short half-life, so
Okay.
it kind of buys us time.
Yes.
But the opioids might still be circulating in the person's bloodstream.
Okay.
So when that wears off, they'll reattach to those opioid receptors in the brain, and you can have a secondary overdose.
A relapse, yeah.
So it's really important that if you use this, you still call 911, and that you understand that we do have the Good Samaritan's Law. We do have the Good Samaritan's Act in Connecticut.
Okay.
That if you call 911 because of a drug overdose, regardless of what is at the scene, including, drug paraphernalia, nobody on site is going to be prosecuted. The intention is, if somebody is overdosed and needs emergency assistance, then we want you to call 911. We want you to ask for help, and our emergency services will provide that help, and there will be no prosecution. There will be no negative implication to the person who called 911. So it's really important that people understand that. And then the other thing that we do, and we spend a lot of time doing, is we work with the evidence-based program Mental Health First Aid, which is an unbelievably important tool that I personally believe every human, every adult needs to take.
Okay.
Because if you think about how many of us out there know how to do CPR, have you done CPR?
In the military, yes.
Okay, so you know how to do that. Have you ever had to use it?
No.
Okay, most people who know how to do CPR never use it. If you do mental health first aid, you will use that every single day of your life, because it's about understanding how do we work better with each other? How do we be more compassionate? How can we be more understanding? How can we be more observant? How can we be less judgmental about each other? And recognize that we are only as strong as the community that we build around us. And that early intervention piece, the ability for us to be able to recognize that somebody we care about, we work with, we go to church with, we play sport with, is struggling, and knowing how to ask and support them without judgment and without stigma to get the assistance they need early, rather than waiting until their life becomes disrupted.
Wow.
So I think at the end of the show as well, there's going to be a slide that's going to offer the viewers at home an opportunity to reach out if they would like the Farmington Valley Health District to provide any of these trainings for your community, for your church, for your business, for your school, for your daycare center. Everybody needs to know how to do this. And Mental Health First Aid has also come out with 2 amazing additional programs. They have Youth Mental Health First Aid, which has been designed for adults who are working with youth. So fabulous for parents of teenagers. even better for parents of preteens, better to be forewarned. Learn what's normal for your teen and what's abnormal for your teen. Understand some of the challenges from a mental health perspective that your teenagers are going through so that you can have a more open, honest conversation with them that allows you to connect and to help them to not be ashamed of having days where they're not okay.
What else do you have here?
Just before we move on to that, we also have teen mental health first aid, which is for 15 to 18-year-olds, and it teaches teenagers to recognize in each other how to be the best support that they can be and to recognize that you always need to involve a safe adult if you're worried about the mental health and well-being of one of your friends.
Sure.
So these are all opportunities to be trained, and we will provide those for you.
Okay.
This is actually a drug disposal bag.
Okay.
So one of the risk factors in communities is the availability of prescription drugs that are in all of our drug cabinets at home.
Oh, yes.
You know, most of us who've reached a certain age have got a certain number of prescriptions still floating around.
At home. That's correct.
And many people don't finish them and say, you know what, I'll hold on to that just in case I need it.
Oh, boy.
So the just in case I need it isn't such a big deal if it's just adults or perhaps yourself in a home and you know what you're doing and what you're using and it's been prescribed. It becomes a problem when you've got a young person or you've got a person who is struggling with an addiction disorder and they're at that point where they're either experimenting or they're needing to continue to take a substance. So if they're a visitor in your home or it's a grandchild or a niece or a nephew or a neighbor that's coming into your home and those prescription drugs are available, it's easy access and it begins a cycle that we want to try to close that gateway. So the Farmington Valley Health District has these available and we're happy to provide them to members of the public. It's just a simple disposal bag that allows you to put unused prescriptions. You open the prescription bottle and you put the tablets on the inside. Simple plastic bag that you then fill with an unpalatable substance. So something like cat litter or coffee grounds or flour or something like that. And then you fill it with water, you seal it up, and you throw it in the trash. Okay. So that removes the viability of the substance, which gets it out of harm's way. It gets it out of the reach of individuals that might be vulnerable to this.
Wow.
It's also important to know that most police stations in the Farmington Valley have a drug disposal box. You can turn up to your police station with as many prescription drugs as you want. It's usually in the lobby. You open up it's a bit like a trash can. You open up the lid and you put all of the prescriptions in and you close the lid and you walk away. The police officers don't want to talk to you. They have no desire to discuss what you just put in there. They will then dispose of them safely to ensure that that is additional prescription medication that is not in circulation or not available for those that may be struggling with addiction disorders.
Now, I have been active in the gun violence movement in terms of teaching people how to keep their weapons safe.
Absolutely.
And I knew that you could turn your weapons into the police department.
Absolutely.
I never knew that you could turn in your
Absolutely.
drugs. I never knew that.
Absolutely. Because, you know, if we can turn off the faucet, we can reduce the source, we reduce the early access points. And often for our young people, it's that experimentation phase that allows them to access something that was not prescribed for them, that they can either take for themselves or give to somebody else, which can begin that cascade of symptoms and challenges that can lead to addiction disorder.
That leads you down the garden path. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. My goodness gracious. Well, you have any final thoughts before we wrap this up, Justine?
Look, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to come on and to talk about the work that we do at the Farmington Valley Health District. I think most of you now know a lot more about me than you knew before.
That's right.
I'm just like the rest of you. I too have had my struggles, and you know, it's the challenges in our lives that actually add the color. It's the color of our lives. It's the part that makes us unique and special. And I think that as communities, if we can remove shame and blame and judgment and really concentrate on increasing our mental health literacy, in all aspects of our community, for whatever faith you believe, for whatever clubs you're a part of. Let's really try as a community to pull together and to make mental health the norm, to make looking after our mental health and talking about our mental health what's normal rather than abnormal.
All right. Thank you. Justine, thank you so very much for being here the past couple of hours and sharing your knowledge, your story, and your life with us. Wow, I've been touched, and I hope you have too. My name is James Ransom Reed Jr., and I'm the host of What's Your Story? Everybody has a story. What's yours? Until next time, good night.
The Saybrook Fish House in Canton has been serving fresh seafood, chicken, and prime steaks for 40 years. Experience one of our 3 unique dining room settings, 2 with fireplaces, or relax in our cozy pub with a craft beer, wine by the glass, or specialty cocktail while enjoying a meal from our new lighter fare pub menu. Serving lunch and dinner Tuesday through Sunday. Reservations accepted for parties of 2 to 42. Gift cards always available. The Saybrook Fish House, nestled at the crossroads of routes 44, 202, and 179 in Canton.
I'm your host, Kurt Barwis. Today, I have a very special guest, Dr. Andrew Lin.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Veterans Corner. My name is Chuck Wooden.
Decision for ourselves for this week, if we want to be made well.
Hi, welcome to the crack of dawn. It's Dawn Lombardi. I'm starting the painting. It's going to be the clips with some water. Love it.
He took me on the sets of Lost in Space, Batman.
Everybody has a story. What's yours? Until next time,